Welcome, everybody. Special thank you to the OBR streaming network for hosting us and OBR.com. And guys, if you want subscribers to OBR.com, just a heads up, this is the time to do it. If you have any questions on the coaching search, anything is to be found in the insider forums where guys like Lane Atkins and Pete Smith are answering your questions basically at the drop of a dime whenever you need them. So be sure to check out OBR.com. This is the time to do it. The off season is ramping up. Pete Smith, good to see you, big guy. How are you? How was your weekend, sir?
Weekend was good. What's funny is I absolutely cannot stand the NCAA calendar as it relates to college football until that week of Thursday to Monday is just nonstop good stuff. But everything else about the NCAA calendar is genuinely horrific. Plus, we get the bonus of extending into Tuesday, and the Steelers are no more, and I'm okay with that too.
Amen to that. Not just the Steelers, though, Pete. There's a certain team in Jacksonville that our friends in Buffalo took care of to get us a nice lower draft pick that makes us a little bit happy. But, hey, let's talk about the big news of the day, dude. Let's talk about Mike Tomlin stepping down. Let's talk about now 9 head coach openings. And let's be honest, the AFC North is going to look drastically different next year and moving forward.
Yeah. Can we have a mulligan on firing Kevin Stefanski? We'd have far and away the best coach in the division. Yeah, it's crazy that Zach Taylor's the last man standing. So it's completely different. Mike Tomlin's whole situation is interesting because the Steelers did put everything into this thing. As far as, the players that they signed, acquired through trades and everything else, they got older for this year, bringing in Aaron Rodgers, bringing in Jalen Ramsey, bringing in some of these other players. And it obviously still fell short. Mike Tomlin creates a massive hole because, in as much as, there's sort of an expectation that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be really good because they always are.
Yeah.
The landscape in the last 20 years is completely different in terms of the money involved. And I suspect they will hire a very good coach, and that will ultimately work itself out. But the problem is that the Steelers are one of the inheritors as far as ownership groups. They don't have a ton of money. So they're not building a state-of-the-art facility. They're not building a great, training center and all this other stuff. They're still behind railroad tracks, sharing with Pitt. And so much of what they were able to hold together was people going, I just like playing I love Tomlin. I like playing for this guy. So it will be genuinely curious, one, if they can fire a coach, you can sort of create a similar feel. And two, what is it going to look like? Because they have to do some serious work on this roster and make some difficult choices, not the least of which revolves around TJ Watt, who, the lung issue is awful. And, you're not going to hold that against him, but they are paying him $40 million each of the next few seasons.
Yep.
And there's a scenario where they could trade him and eat $30 million of dead cap and get $12 million in cap space. But this is the Pittsburgh Steelers. They can't afford to do that. They're not going to eat $30 million of cap space, $30 million of dead cap to pay a guy not to play. They don't pay guys not to coach. So it's going to be a different deal. And I don't know, and maybe the Steelers are going to be one of these teams that, sells shares to private equity or something to get a cash infusion to maybe change their fortunes on this. But I think it's going to be an interesting changeover for them that they've had this great thing going for them for 20 years. I think that's part of the reason they've kept it going so long is I don't know that they have a great answer on where to go from here.
So there's a couple things that I want to ask you about this situation. First of all, the Steelers, right? When I look at that job opening, I look at it two different ways, right? You have an ownership group and a sense of security if you get that job, unlike any other in the sport. So for me, from an ownership standpoint, the Steelers are probably the top job available. We don't see a lot of organizations offer the patience and the time to head coaches that we've seen the Steelers do in the past. And granted, a lot's changed over the last, 50, 60 years since they've been hiring these guys, but still, nonetheless, it's a place that you want to work, right? But at this point, you look at the roster, and they are on the brink of disaster. And they're short on funds, they're short on draft capital, and they've got a huge hole at quarterback when Rodgers inevitably decides to hang it up this year. He's a free agent.
Come back, resign. Let's go. Get it back. New coach. Let's go. Let's go.
It's wishful thinking, Pete.
I'm bummed we don't get another run of Tomlin and Rodgers. I just don't think we had enough time. Just one more run.
Yeah,
I think they were close.
I respect that. I don't think the Steelers do. I think they're gonna find something. Obviously, they're gonna find something new. But I'm curious here because their MO is to go young and to go defense. But could they surprise? Could they go young and go offense to try to jumpstart this thing? Like we always get defense right. Maybe go against the grain and go a little bit outside of the box.
It's possible. I think they're going to go with their tried and true method on that part of it. But yeah, I don't see an obvious path forward for them either way. Yeah, because of what you mentioned, the quarterback position, and then it says you say, well, it's a great place to work. Yeah, and that the Steelers ownership is willing to stick with you, but I have real questions if fans will. Oh, because 200%. the Steelers have not had a losing season in the entire run, and yet at the end of some of those years, there's empty stadiums in Pittsburgh where the fans got fed up, even with winning records, and basically gave up. So if they actually there's a lot of Steelers fans who are like, man, they seek the tank. They want to desperately tank and get low enough where they can get a top quarterback and all this other stuff. And I will be very curious if, one, the Steelers can manifest that. Maybe their current situation is going to force that, whether they like it or not. But actually going through it, as you've seen here, there's a lot of people are like, man, if the Browns just lose, 2 or 3 more years or whatever and get all these things, and then halfway through year one, I'm sick of this. I don't want to do this and all that. Like, people give up real fast when they realize how long it is. They, people, bought into the idea of young kids on offense for the Browns this year. And then as we went and started going through it, this sucks. I hate this. They're not good enough and fast enough and all this other stuff. People are wildly more impatient. Jimmy Haslam is the worst offender of this of all time. He can't stop himself from buying into a plan and then bailing on it partway through. He's now done it twice. So that's the part where I sit there and go, I don't doubt that the Steelers are willing to go through this, but are they going to ultimately have a problem where the fans basically are like, okay, we're going to check out and we'll see you next season at points and see where this thing's going. And is that going to get to a point where now the Steelers do have to operate differently? And they do, if this new guy doesn't win, are we talking about a guy who's out in 3 years or 4 years or whatever? Tomlin got to coach as long as he did because he didn't lose, or didn't have a losing season.
Yeah, but he also inherited a Hall of Fame quarterback, Pete. Yeah, that's
undoubtedly
a big difference.
Huge. And they have not found a way to
since
Ben Roethlisberger, again, have not had a losing season, but without Ben Roethlisberger, they are lost in that position. So that's where, I just don't know how this whole process is going to go. And maybe they will just Steelers their way through it and continue to be a 9-8 team every year somehow, some way. But something has to give. Is Cam Hayward going to come back and play again? Or is he done? With
a new coaching staff, I would almost refuse to believe he would. If he does come back, I don't think it's in Pittsburgh,
Right. I think he's under contract. He keeps signing extensions.
I thought it was just a 1-year deal for him.
I'd have to look, but he seems to keep signing extensions with them. So maybe that's the case. I mean, at one point he threatened to sign with Cleveland to sort of stick it to Pittsburgh in contract negotiations. But I'd be really surprised if he's still playing at a ridiculously high level, but I'd be really surprised if he played anywhere else. So he may just be done. And look, say what you will. I think Keanu Benton and the dude they drafted from Oregon this year are interesting players.
Yeah,
when push came to shove,
had a good year.
When push came to shove, the Houston Texans ran them over.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the whole thing. We're gonna have the same conversation with Mason Graham. We're gonna sit here and go, well, he's gonna grow into his body and get stronger. And maybe that's what will happen for those guys. But and they'll do what they do. But there's real questions because they have a ton invested on that defense to just get trampled. I mean, was CJ Stroud high in that game? I couldn't believe how bad he was. The only reason the Texans didn't win by 50 is because he kept giving away the ball. He couldn't catch a snap.
No, the interception was terrible.
Yeah. So, they have dudes. Don't get me wrong. Nick Herbig is fantastic. Joey Porter Jr. is a pretty good player. They have some guys that are really, really good. Alex Highsmith's still a very good player. They've got those young defensive tackles. Maybe they're going to grow into something, but they've got a whole lot of Jalen Ramsey is such a feast or famine player. When he's great, he's fantastic. I still question the return on the investment they've gotten from Patrick Queen. I don't find him to be very good for as much as he's being paid. TJ Watt, the return on investment there seems like it's going to be dismal.
Yeah.
If Hayward retires, where that's a lot of holes to fill. And that doesn't deal with quarterback. It doesn't deal with the fact that they have basically one wide receiver. Calvin Austin's pretty good, but it's DK Metcalf was the whole thing. And the second he stopped producing in that game, it was over. They've got an interesting tight end weapon in the big guy.
Or you like Darnell?
Well, they don't use Freiermuth.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing though. The offense doesn't do anything, Pete. They haven't been able to get anything going all year. They had a couple games where the running game picked up. They had a couple monster DK games, but they can't do anything consistently. It's a scheme or a line problem, however you want to slice it.
No, they literally did not use Pat Freiermuth. He was on the bench most of the game, for Jonnu Smith. And if the Steelers don't want Pat Freiermuth, I will take him. I will take him right away. I will play him at Y and be fine. Because what's funny is the second he goes into the game, Aaron Rodgers throws the ball at him. Mm-hmm. He's just he's a old school Y, and for whatever reason, Arthur Smith does not like him. But and maybe that dynamic's going to change, and they will find somebody who uses him. But it's bizarre to me that you have a guy who does exactly what you would want with DK Metcalf, somebody who can take up, can create plays in the middle of the field to potentially take attention away from the outside for DK Metcalf, and they just are like, nah, screw this. We're going to play Jonnu Smith and the other dude. They have a tight end that doesn't do much for them. In lieu of that. So, I mean, like it's just a bizarre set of choices they made. So maybe this is new life for Pat Freiermuth. He's under contract for quite a while on that deal. So, and that's the other part. Like the Steelers, they don't cut guys. They don't really trade guys. When they sign these guys, for the most part, they keep them. So that's where I'm very curious to see how they play this out. And, is a new coach going to come in there and be like, man, I want to come in here and I want to get rid of TJ Watt. I want to trade him. And are they going to be in there like, nope, can't do it. And how does that conversation go? But it's just a very complicated mess to me for the Steelers. And it's not permanent. They will get through it. They always do. And unfortunately, they will probably get through it faster than the Browns do based on history. But like they got some real challenges.
Well, a couple things on Tomlin. One that I found very interesting that I read on Twitter today. I hadn't given it much thought, but I think it's legit. Why is there no Mike Tomlin coaching tree? Like none of his guys move on.
I knew that. Yeah. I'm well aware of that fact. He's
measured against Harbaugh constantly, right? Because they've both been, the longest tenure, the rivalry, all that stuff. Harbaugh has guys go out all the time, man. He's had plenty of assistants get jobs. He's had plenty of assistants get looks. It's wild that like Tomlin has none. He has no tree. Yeah,
his best hope is that Brian Flores, like who was there for a minute as a defensive coordinator / linebackers coach,
get a cup of coffee.
Yeah, like that's his best shot. They've just not been good at hiring assistants. Now, part of this is the fact that they've had the same special teams coordinator since the game was invented. Danny Smith or whatever his name is like 150 years old. Yeah. They just don't fire guys. And this is the whole thing where like people would get so mad at Kevin Stefanski. Why are you so loyal to assistants? The Steelers do not fire guys. You sign a guy to a contract, he's playing out the whole contract, which drove them nuts. For some of the coordinators they've had there, and they've just had to sit there and eat it. But that's how they roll. So, yeah, there's nothing. Arthur Smith, maybe, but he's not, even if that happens, he's been a head coach before. It's not like he's going to be a Tomlin tree guy. Like, hey, by the way, I'd love nothing more than the Steelers to be just like, screw it, we're going to promote Arthur Smith and roll with that. Sign me up for that. But, yeah, it's just a test. One of the many, many reasons I want Tomlin nowhere near this team is because he's not been good when it comes to hiring good assistants. And or at least for most people, they want to measure assistants by interest around the league in guys that are trying to get promoted. That never happens for them. So it's one more thing where I think Tomlin is a candidate I want no part of. And thankfully, he resigned. The Steelers still control his rights, so they'd have to trade him or agree to trade him or just agree to rescind his contract rights to allow another team to hire him. And maybe there's a world where he does that for a team like Miami. They're not going to do that for the Browns, and thankfully, I'm grateful for that because I want no part of that element in Cleveland. I think the game has – I don't want to say it's passed him by, but I just think he is – whether it's the situation and the circumstances he's in with Pittsburgh or whatever, but there are certain elements which just seems like he refuses to evolve, and he's ridiculously conservative in terms of his approach. And I just think it's outdated and it gets him beat too much. He's not good at managing the clock. He's been doing after 2 decades of this. The advantages he brings are the culture element, the leadership element, which, credit to him. He gets, high marks on both of those because, again, there are guys in this league who say, I want to play for Mike Tomlin all the time. So I cannot take that away from him, and I cannot take the leadership thing away from him. But on the tactics, on so many of the other elements to the coaching stuff, you have to be able to hire a really good staff. That's one of my big hangups with the whole thing of moving on from Kevin Stefanski is I'm terrified that they're going to not be able to get as good of an assistant coaching group as he had. And it's going to be a net negative on that. And it's a huge part of this whole thing. You have to get that piece right.
Yeah, I agree with that. I find the Tomlin situation fascinating just because of the organization that it's coming from, right? We don't know how much authority Tomlin had for hiring and firing and picking staff members. Like, we assume it was a lot, but honestly, I don't know. I would be interested to see what Tomlin can do under different circumstances with a different organization. And I'll say this, there are plenty of reasons, and you state them very eloquently, but there are plenty of reasons to avoid Mike Tomlin. But I look at Tomlin in the same light that I look at Harbaugh. He's a leader of men. He's a CEO of a head coach. And obviously his assistants and his coordinators would be huge hires and huge parts of the process. But I'm not just going to cast aside Mike Tomlin and say there's no way he would work in Cleveland. Because anytime you get that type of leadership and that sort of commanding presence that the league responds to the way that it does, I would definitely be interested. I absolutely would. I would have my concerns, and the lack of offense as the second he lost a Hall of Fame quarterback until the second he left would be concern number one, obviously. But I'm not about to say that I wouldn't be interested in Tomlin if we didn't have to trade for him.
If I'm Mike Tomlin, I'm never coaching again.
Yeah. Amen.
I'm going to walk out and I'm going to walk right into the Hall of Fame and not have and go in being the guy that never has a losing season.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
I'm not going to some other team that might not be good and be like, well, we're screwed and I'm going to have to eat this.
Yeah.
I'm going in fully being the one guy who gets to go, I never had a losing season. I'm not touching it. I'm good. So
I'm looking to join up a team at Fox or a team at CBS or a team at ESPN or a team at the NFL Network. I'm going to be on TV. I'm going to flash my Super Bowl ring, and you're right. You're absolutely right.
He gets to have a winning record forever on TV.
Forever. Yeah.
Yeah. And one, I think he'd be good on TV. He's good at this whole soundbite thing. I'd be curious. I'd genuinely be curious to hear him talk more than just out of press conference sound bites and be able to elaborate more with the freedom and stuff. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I suspect he will take a year off at least, and maybe he will get back into this thing. But I think it will turn into Bill Cowher. I think it will be, is he going to come back? And I think Bill Cowher loved that, as all coaches in that situation do. The whole get to juice up that thing and potentially give yourself even a little bit more bigger boost as far as your pay in the TV realm. But I think that's going to be it. We'll see. But I don't think I don't think Mike Tomlin is necessarily chasing the record like Bill Belichick clearly was in terms of wins. He'd have to coach a whole lot more to do that, and I don't think he wants to end up. I don't want to speak for him too much, but I don't think he wants to end up being like Bill Belichick, where now Bill Belichick goes from being the greatest NFL coach of all time to now people are laughing at him because of all this other antics. And not to suggest Mike Tomlin would get into the stuff that Bill Belichick's getting into, but still.
I bet he wish he could.
Yeah, well, maybe. But don't put yourself in the situation where now you are being laughed out of the league. Or Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll's perhaps a better example. Now he's sort of being laughed out of the league because he was so bad with the Raiders. And Mike Tomlin's not there yet by far, but you don't want to be in a situation where that could be the next step for you.
Yeah, and if he takes the wrong job, that's a very possible next step. It's that simple. You never know how this stuff's going to go.
Like the Raiders job, he could take that job.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's. 3 jobs open in the AFC North, Pete. Now, I mean, obviously, outside looking in, it's obvious that the Browns are the third choice of anybody coming into this scenario. But I feel like the Browns roster versus the Steelers roster is a pretty damn good argument. I really think that it is, and I think that's what the Browns are going to have to hang their hats on in this whole search. I mean, they can't compete with the resume of the Ravens and the Steelers right now. They just can't.
The Ravens are number one. Easy.
Yeah.
It's not even close. I know why you can make the argument for the Steelers. But if you're the Browns head coach, you have obviously the draft picks. You have 6 and 24. The Steelers have 21 and whatever else they've got. You have a team that spends money. You can sit there and go, well, the owner, this and that. Well, okay, that's fine. You're going to get a brand new training complex by 2027. You're going to get a brand new stadium by 2029. You are not going to get any of these things with the Steelers.
Yeah.
You are not going to get, the new anything with Pittsburgh right now. So there's that's where this is where I have curiosities as to where this thing's going, because I'm not suggesting that they're going to become the Cincinnati Bengals, where everybody looks down on them and they basically look at them as a poverty franchise. But relative to their capacity to do the things the teams do right now, the Steelers are near the bottom. And I don't know how much stock people put into it, really, but in the NFLPA report cards, the Rooneys finished near the bottom of ownership in terms of willingness to do A, B, and C and all this other stuff. Yeah. So maybe coaching candidates don't care. They don't look at that stuff, and maybe they'll just sit there and look at the same way you do, and they go, the organization just gets it right. And Omar Khan is a good GM. Mm-hmm. They have drafted reasonably well. That they're the continuity thing, and they allow you to operate the franchise in a way that's going to be effective and consistent. But I do wonder if there's pause because of the lack of spending resources and the fact that everybody else is sort of, the Ravens and the Browns, at least relative to the division, are trying to give the players state-of-the-art stuff, trying to compete on all those levels, that they are more quick to be able to replace assistants or hire more, spend more on an assistant pool, have a bigger staff, whatever, all these other things. So I totally understand looking at Steelers ownership and going, that's 1,000 times better than Jimmy Haslam. I think that part, there's no argument. I just don't know if that's enough to trump the other stuff that's going on. And we shall see. The other part about this is ultimately, for reasons we've talked about, I think the Steelers and Browns are going to be looking at completely different pools of candidates. Yes, age-wise, they're probably going to end up in the same neighborhood as far as who they hire. But I think beyond that, I would be surprised if the Steelers don't end up ultimately in the defensive side of the ball. I would be surprised if the Browns don't end up on the offensive side of the ball. And that has more to do with, to get into the Browns thing, that has more to do with the fact that if you are a defensive head coaching candidate and you are looking at the Browns or any team and you're trying to make this thing your own, and the first thing they're telling you is, well, we don't want to mess with the defense, it immediately makes the job significantly less attractive.
Yeah.
For that standpoint, where if you're an offensive coach and you're trying to get your foot in the door and do all this, you may love the fact that, look, I just get Andrew Barry's coming out and saying, we're gonna invest totally on offense. I get to build my whole thing. I've got about 3 starters next season. I get to do all this stuff. And look at the offensive room. There's room for activities and all this other stuff, whereas the defense is basically done. So that's ultimately why I think they're going to end up with different candidate pools. I think the Browns are going to end up with an offensive coach just because of how they're set up. Could be surprised on that, but I think that's where they're going to end up. And I think the Steelers are going to end up on the defensive side of the ball because that's typically what they do. And in terms of the types of head coaches they typically get, they are the loud. I don't mean to say loud in the sense that is bad, but they're demonstrative leadership type guys are typically more on the defensive side of the ball, as opposed to the offensive guys are typically stereotypically the more thinker types, teacher types. Yeah. So I don't think they're going to end up looking at the same guys in terms of that. So even if you make the case that you think the Steelers' job is better than the Browns, and I make the case that the Browns' job is better than Steelers, I think for the people that are there to appeal to, it's irrelevant.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about. All right. So the 2 different candidates. Well, Pittsburgh has a type, Pete. So we know that Pittsburgh goes defense, right? But and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure when they hired Knoll, when they hired Cowher, when they hired Tomlin, they were all 30 years old.
37 for Chuck Knoll, 34 for Mike Tomlin, 34 for Cowher, and I think it was 37 for the guy before Chuck Knoll. So yeah.
Okay. All right. So I mean that's pretty much. So we're looking at Jesse Minter. We're looking at Chris Shula. Is he in his 40s yet?
No.
That's like Pittsburgh's like Leonardo DiCaprio. Like they get aged out so quick,
Yeah. Chris Shula's 39. Chris Shula's 39. He will be 40. Well, they better hurry up. He's gonna be 40.
Yeah, you gotta jump on that, man.
So yeah, and that's where I'm curious, because there's a sense that there's a lot of pull for Brian Flores, who's certainly not old. He's 44.
Yeah.
But that would be slightly outside of that range. Do they care? Is he just their type? They know him a little bit.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the easiest transition for them to make.
Yeah.
Because there is some familiarity. And if the Steelers really don't want to have to, or are going to try to hold on to some of these guys, if they're sitting there going, man, we don't want to lose Cam Hayward. We don't want to, we don't want to have to get into real conversations about getting rid of TJ Watt or any of these other guys. They may sit there and go, Brian Flores is probably the cleanest transition we can make to sort of keep that side of the ball intact so far as it is and really focus on the offensive side of the ball. And maybe Brian Flores can attract a good offensive coordinator to build said offensive side of the ball and, get a quarterback that Brian Flores will approve of. Otherwise it will go very bad.
Yeah, it'll be very bad. I was going to say, whoever goes to Pittsburgh better hope he's a fan. It's gonna be a rough.
Miami about to us. See if he wants to play here in the Steelers. So yeah, I mean, so that's the question. If you're the Steelers ownership, that'd be the question I'd want to know. Are you cool with that? And maybe Chris Shula is willing to just be like, yeah, I'm willing to roll with these guys and just work with it. Or maybe that's, Jesse Minter's fine with that. I don't know the answer to that, but to me, that's where Brian Flores, I think, might have a slight advantage over the competition.
Yeah, I'd sign up for Flores. Look, I think Flores is a great coach. I think he definitely has some issues that make him borderline unhireable as a head coach. But I think he's such a strong coach. I think he's excellent personally, and I would hate him in Pittsburgh. But at the same time, if him going to Pittsburgh brought back the old defense and then had Flores with his hands all over the developing quarterback, I'd be okay with that. If I'm being perfectly honest with you.
Listen, if you're the head coach, get in there, get to work.
Yeah, right.
Hold that
don't be afraid to coach him tough, Brian. Let him have it.
Listen, you make sure you let him know who he's not every day.
All right, well, let's shift real quick over to the Browns. I mean, obviously, this is why we're all here, and we got the head coach search going. So, of the candidates that we've already interviewed, we've got Schwartz, we've got Reese, we've got Dan Pitcher, Adam Dirty, Todd Monken, and Mike McDaniel. Which of those names are you most interested in, and which of those names are you like, dear God, no? And there's three different groups we're going to go over. So
there's a couple in the I really don't want them to go this route.
Yeah.
And the first one is Jim Schwartz. I do not want them to go the Jim Schwartz route. And my reasoning for this is pretty simple. One, I think just from Jim Schwartz's standpoint, I think Jim Schwartz is a very good coach. Mm-hmm. I think he's a good coordinator. I think we've seen what he can get out of a team as a head coach. And I think there's a cap on that. I don't think it's going to go much further than it has. It may not go any further than Kevin Stefanski took it. The other thing I don't like about Jim Schwartz is the precedent it sets because of what Jimmy Haslam said when they fired Kevin Stefanski. Rather than saying, I just don't want to look at Kevin Stefanski's face, which might have been uncouth, but would have given him a lot of breathing room in terms of being able to do these other things. He said specifically, I don't think, when he was asked, do you think Kevin Stefanski won enough with the talent he had? His answer was no. You saw the talent we had. It was not good. Mm-hmm. So what was the number? Was it 6 wins? Was it 7 wins? Or was that irrelevant the entire way, and it really just amounted to, I'm just tired of looking at Kevin Stefanski, which again, I don't know if you saw today, Steve Bisciotti's very honest opinion about John Harbaugh, basically saying, if they had made the playoffs, would he still be the head coach? And his answer was for another week. But if you now say that Kevin Stefanski did not win enough with the talent he had, which was a bad roster, and you don't have an obvious path to a quarterback, and we're presuming that the roster is going to be better and not worse after an offseason, and now Jim Schwartz is the head coach, what is that number that's going to keep him safe? Because if they go out and win 5 games next year, now you've put yourself in a very clear position where you, based on your own words, which, I mean, Jimmy Haslam could theoretically just turn around and be like, yeah, I know what I said, and I don't mean it.
Yeah.
But like, you set up a precedent where now we're getting rid of everybody in 12 months, and we're doing this whole thing over again, which I've said all along, I don't think is an unforeseeable outcome. But if I'm Andrew Berry, I'm sitting there very quietly going, please, I do not want to hire Jim Schwartz, because this is very real for me, because now my ass is on the line and I could be out of here in 12 months. Whereas if they bring in somebody else, there might be a little bit more understanding. If, you still said it, it's still out there, but like, you can at least massage the messaging and not put it all on Andrew Berry. Because the other part about hiring Jim Schwartz is it puts a lot more pressure on Andrew Berry. And there's already plenty. Yeah. So that's part of the reason I'm out on Schwartz, and the reason I do not think they will hire him as the head coach. I do not think that will happen for those reasons, because I think it's the fastest way to be out of this thing in a year. And if Jimmy Haslam really wants to keep Jim Schwartz around for a while, that's the other part that I don't think works in his favor. Because if he hires him, now he puts him sort of on a clock. Yeah. And I think he likes the fact that he's a coordinator. The guys can sort of stick around for a long time as a coordinator. So that's my sneaky explanation for why I don't want and don't think Jim Schwartz will get the job.
Okay. Well, let me ask you real quick on Schwartz, because I have like kind of a tin cap theory on or a tinfoil hat theory on this whole deal. I think when it came out a few days ago that the Browns are not necessarily insisting, but letting it known that they want to keep Schwartz in all these head coach interviews, I feel like that's like a just in case we are going to lose him, because we want to put this out so the fan base knows and the locker room knows we wanted Jim. We tried to keep Jim. We did everything we could, but it's out of our hands. Because if they're really doing that, I think that's a mistake. And I really like Jim Schwartz, and I love the defense that he's cultivated. But I'm not going to lose a coach that I want when my biggest issue is going to be like, well, who am I going to get to coach the most talented side of the football? Yep. Who am I going to get that can get the most out of this amazing defensive line, and Denzel Ward and Carson Swetzinger? Like, I think Jim Schwartz is great. But if I had to replace him or the offensive coach, and I had to worry about who was going to be able to like raise things up, the defense will be fine. That's just the way I look at it. The locker room will take a hit. They love Schwartz, and he's excellent. But I'm not forcing him on anybody.
Plus, I think they have an in-house candidate they could promote. If
you're talking Ephraim Banda,
I think he's already interviewed with the Dallas Cowboys. He's had a smattering of defensive coordinator interviews. There's a belief that he's going to be a dude sooner than later. Yeah. So if, the immediate reaction to Jim Schwartz interviewing with the Baltimore Ravens is, oh my God, the Browns better hurry up and hire a coach, or this is putting them pressure that they better make a decision so they can figure out what they're doing with Schwartz. If for whatever reason Jim Schwartz went to the Baltimore Ravens, who do not have a single piece for what he wants to do on the defensive line right now, my immediate thought would be, I'm going to interview other guys. But one of the guys I'm going to look at is Ephraim Banda. Mm-hmm. Because Ephraim Banda could be promoted, and hopefully he keeps Tarver, and hopefully he keeps Jock there, and they figure it out from there. But I don't rule that out as a fallback option. I'm with you. I'd rather Jim Schwartz is kept around. I have qualms with Jim Schwartz on certain elements in terms of the inflexibility of the defense and some of the things they just have not been able to figure out. But I know what that side of the ball is going to be good. And if they can get an offense that goes, this team will be very good in a hurry. But I'm not, to your point, I'm not going to be held hostage by this situation. So I agree with you on your thought process that that is messaging.
Yeah.
Smart. Now, ultimately, do I think Jim Schwartz is going anywhere? No, because Jim Schwartz is not stupid, and Jim Schwartz would be really hard pressed to walk away from Myles Garrett.
Yeah. And walk into a better situation. Defense is tailor-made for his scheme.
Yes,
they
because
gave him all the toys in the last 3 years.
They have done this, and this is part of the reason I'm so annoyed at the whole Kevin Stefanski thing is because he essentially was a patsy. Well, they gave Jim Schwartz all the goodies on that side of the ball, and basically said, "All right, you're out of here." So
it's like, just be patient, Kevin. 2026 is your year.
So that's where that is. So the other guy I don't think I want is Mike McDaniel. I don't like look, I think he's brilliant on offense in a lot of things he's able to do. What he does with the running game with Miami when they at times had virtually no blocking is incredible. Devin Achane is great for them. And there are some things there where I sit there and go, yeah, that'd be really interesting. I don't like the prospect of Jim Schwartz having to be the guy who kicks Mike McDaniel in the ass along with everybody else on this team. I don't like the fact that Miami Dolphins players might like Mike McDaniel, but they don't respect him enough to be accountable to what's going on. And there's all these shenanigans we keep hearing about, whether it's the defense doing their own thing and in week one or Tua going after the whole team because the stuff that's going on. I just watched people throw a hissy fit over a wristband with Kevin Stefanski, which was such a small issue. I cannot imagine what people will do if some of the stuff that happened with the Miami Dolphins happened in Cleveland with Mike McDaniel. And I think, for the people who got sick of Kevin Stefanski for not looking like Mike Vrabel, let's be honest, for not being Mike Vrabel, that type of coach, that the guy out of Central Casting, because for a certain population, it's not about being a good football coach. It's about, the
looking the part,
validating your feelings as a fan. Mike McDaniel's terrible for that. He's optically doesn't have the things that most fans would want from a head coach. He's a very thoughtful guy in how he talks, but he's also sort of quippy. And I think that rubs people, especially when you're in the middle of a losing season, the wrong way. So I struggle to see where that works with everything they're putting together. So those are the two that really jump out at me and go, yeah, I don't know. The thing with Mike McDaniel, my thing is I think he's perfect as a coordinator because you're going to have him a year or two at most. I think that's about the perfect amount of time for a guy like Mike McDaniel. He's there you get real good real fast, but he's not there long enough to get into the problems that he ran into because he's basically a mercenary and he's going to rehab his image. If he were to go to Detroit and take over that offense as the offensive coordinator, he's going to juice that thing up real quick. Everybody's going to immediately be talking about him as a head coaching candidate, which is great for him.
Yeah.
And then a year or two, he's going to be back as a head coach somewhere. Great. But I think there's a very limited timeline for a guy like that to work, in my view. Maybe you disagree. So
I disagree to a certain extent. I think there's issues that McDaniel's had in Miami, and the whole strong leader in the locker room type thing. I feel like that can be played up a little bit much. I don't necessarily think you have to be that way. I think there's a lot of different ways to reach players, and there's a lot of different ways to get your message across. Now, what I will say in defense of McDaniel's in Miami, I mean, you know I'm not a fan of Tua, right? And we everybody in the chat too. Everybody knows that when Tua was healthy and this offense was clicking, when he had his weapons, it was stupid to watch. The running game was fantastic. The speed they had on the edges, it was innovative. It was exciting. All that stuff. Miami had real bad luck with injuries. But I think the biggest problem in Miami and the biggest reason that you have the locker room questions about McDaniel and the players not respecting and accountability wasn't very big. Miami didn't home grow anybody.
True.
Miami brought in all of their guys via trade, and the guys that they brought in had egos, had baggage, had attitudes, and they got blank you money and carte blanche in the locker room. That's just the way it was. Tyreek Hill was like that. Jalen Ramsey was like that. Bradley Chubb was like that. There was just a lot of guys that when you pay guys that money, right, you want it to be your homegrown guys who know what it is to be a Miami Dolphin. They set the stage for it. When a rookie comes in, they show them the ropes for it. What's that?
Does anyone know what that means?
I know, but that's the whole thing, is that none of that was really laid down in McDaniel's tenure. And he had all these guys with attitude and big mouths that were his big time players. And that's just like, that's no way to cultivate a culture, you know? So it's like, I give McDaniel's a little bit of a break in that, because not only did they deal with the injuries and stuff like that, but some of his highest paid players and players that he had to count on were world-class pieces of you-know-what. They just were. Like, some of those guys are not like great guys and great locker room guys and anything like that. So it's tough. It's very tough.
I would submit that Tyreek Hill is not a good human being.
Yeah.
Throw it out there.
I will float that one as well.
My question for you, and maybe you know, maybe you don't. How much of that was Mike McDaniel saying, "Go get me this guy"? And how much of that was
I think McDaniel was the guy. So I don't think he started the Tyreek thing. I think when they found that Tyreek was available and willing to come to Miami, they pitched it to him and he said, "Hell yeah, bring him home, bring him down." You know, and the problem with Tyreek is that he was phenomenal in Miami. He was so good. But the problem is he forced his way out of Kansas City because he wanted money and winning. He had already won his Super Bowls. Now it's about money, right? So Miami gave him money. And then as soon as things went south, he starts bitching that they're not winning. It's like, you made your choice, Tyreek. You don't get both, you know? So there's a ton of negatives to detract from McDaniels, and I get it. He's a retread. He didn't exactly, like, he ended Miami on a bad note with just a rough finish and all that stuff. But the guy's brilliant. And I think that if we compare him with Jim Schwartz, I've been saying it all year, Pete, if we get a top 20 offense with this defense, we're going to be in the playoff conversation. We are.
That's a really, like, I'm genuinely curious now if that's something that comes up in the coaching interview with Mike McDaniel. If you're sitting there going, we've got Quinshon Judkins and Harold Finn, and we've got draft picks, and we want to grow this thing up, and maybe there's a couple trades or whatever, maybe with Jacksonville. Again, maybe I'm not done with Jacksonville yet in terms of trade. But if you're sitting there and you go up and you take somebody at 6 like Mekhi Lemon, and you're like, man, I just want to do what you're talking about. I'd be curious to know if that could work, because they're so much younger that they're going to have basically a whole new group on that side of the ball. Yeah. So that part is genuinely interesting, because you're right. Miami Dolphins were mercenaries by and large. And it's tough when you've got guys, and Zach Sealer's not a lifelong Dolphin. I mean, obviously he was a Ravens draft pick. Yeah. And a waiver claim that the Browns did not make, even though I pleaded for it, who became sort of the culture guy in that locker room. And there's some other guys in that boat, but to your point, Terron Armstead, all those guys were imported. And part of that was because Chris Greer had some success with the draft with Jalen Waddle and some of these, but they were not good. So they supplemented a lot through trades and some of these other things to sort of fix it. So that part is genuinely interesting. So you at least have me intrigued at that possibility based on that information.
Well, I should say based on that perspective. Is you know how good McDaniels is. You know how smart he is, right? And the thing is, I look at that situation in Miami, and I mean, to me, he's going to adapt to whatever situation he goes to. He's going to figure something out and how to make it work with whatever situation he goes to. So I'm fascinated with, like, what kind of veteran quarterback would he look at? Who would he look to bring in? And is it Shador or is it Gabriel that he would gravitate towards immediately? One of those options, I could jump out my window right now, but that's neither here nor there. This is, look, it's a brand new thing. Who knows what kind of vision he would have? But look, I like the backfield, man. Judkins is tough, and if he can come back, look, they're saying what, like by June he's going to be running again, he's going to be active again, and everything like that. Knock on wood. You got Dylan Sampson, you got Raheem Morris. I'm sorry, our running back room to me is good. Ooh. If you want to throw in a couple UDFAs, that's fine for competition. I like our running back room. I know you like Tyler Algier, but I don't necessarily need a veteran. I'll keep it.
No,
cheap.
I agree with you on that, and I don't think Raheem Morris is Raheem Sanders is there, but it's genuinely interesting. That would be the other part about and I don't this is one of those things. How much does a Mike McDaniel want to give away trade secrets, or does he just want to get in there and go, man, this is what I'd love to do with Harold Finn and all this other stuff? I don't know, but that part of it is interesting. And look, I mean, Kevin Stefanski, when he was here, talked about the motions that essentially Mike McDaniel invented in terms of that real quick short motion that creates just that weird trade the DBs have to do on the outside. You have to make a decision. How are you going to play this and all these other elements? But the part
you want to see what he's going to do with Harold Finn, and look at Jonnu Smith last year. He had over 90 catches. He was a killer. He was like all they had on offense. He was like all they had on offense, man. I'm telling you. I'm telling you.
He's so bad, and yet you're right. They got a lot of life out of him. So
look, Jonnu Smith is a specimen, dude. He is a size speed guy. He's an impressive physical specimen. Say what you want, man. Say what you want. He's a talented dude. I hated when Pittsburgh got him.
He did. No, because he kept Pat Freiermuth on the sideline. The best thing they did. No, but what can he do? Because you talk about the passing game, and look, man, I think he'd like Dylan Gabriel. Straight up, I think he'd be all about Dylan Gabriel if he.
I do too, but it's like for me,
I'm not going to say I'm not
that's
saying
my biggest drawback, because he walked into that Miami situation. He's like, yeah, I can win with that guy. No, we just hired you. Tell us you're going to find us a better one. Don't give me that. And that's the thing. He got Tua paid.
Listen, that wouldn't have been a problem if they didn't give him that contract.
But that's another thing. It's like McDaniel's made him do it. That's my number one drawback to Mike McD right now.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to tell you I'm not trying to sell anybody on the idea that he's going to come in and go, listen, we're good at quarterback. I've got my guy. But I genuinely do. Look, there was a lot of smoke around the idea that Miami was a team that reached out.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of Dylan Gabriel. Now, the part
they also apparently almost took Shedeur as well. That was the word out of Miami, is they were going to take Shedeur in the 5th round.
The part I have to correct people on is there's this notion that the Browns took Dylan Gabriel and then the Dolphins traded out of that pick. No, they had already traded that pick to go and steal my guard, Jonas Savanaia, who finally figured out how to play about halfway through the season, which is why I wanted to draft him and put him behind Batonio for a year so he could figure out and learn how to play football. But nevertheless, it would not surprise me if it came in and goes, I like the way Dylan Gabriel plays because it works with what I do. But that element of what would you want to do with this offense? You have a wide open array of options. As I've said all along, you've got basically 8 starters to figure out by next season. Yep. It's Harold Finn, it's Quinshon Chuck, it's Jerry Jeudy, and you've got carte blanche everywhere else. Yeah, which might be appealing to him. So from that standpoint, I could genuinely be moved in that element if the idea of building through the draft is going to be something that's going to work with him, because the other part that he's really good at, and again, I sort of touched on this, he can teach. He knows how to teach, which is super valuable if you're going to go through this process of developing players like that. And, I suspect he'd love to have a guy like Isaiah Bond on his offense. So you've at least opened my mind on the possibility of Mike McDaniel. I still have major reservations on it, but
as you should.
But like everybody else is, for the most part, I know some factoids about them, and the rest is you're basically imprinting your own expectations on them and trying to make them into something based on nothing.
Yeah. Well, and that's my whole issue with, look, I love the idea of Dan Pitcher. Nate Shieldhouse is fascinating, right? I think Grant Udinski is another one. Sign me up. I would be okay if we hired any of those 3 guys, knowing absolutely nothing about them, just that they're super impressive and they're young. And they're coming from situations that, hell yeah. I mean, Cincinnati offensively, granted it's Burrow and it's Chase and it's Higgins, but I would like to get some of that in Cleveland if I could. And same thing with the Rams, and same thing with the Jags. I absolutely love what Jacksonville did this year. And of the limited clips I've seen of Udinski in press conferences and stuff, super impressive. That's it. Look, I'm good with it, man. like we're in a position right now where it's weird. It's like Barry's going to be on the hot seat because he is, just because of the last soon to be 7 years, and just like it is what it is. He can't have a bad year next year and come back. I just don't think it's going to happen, right? I think they'll move on from him. And no, I mean,
if he has a bad year, yes.
Yeah, well, I think
it's more of a case of that's why I think he's desperate to hire somebody who's not in the building, because I think that puts a whole new perspective on this thing and changes it. Because like good GMs, which I think Barry has, the people hate on him for being, up until this point, was an average drafter and then crushes it. Like the expectations people have on the draft are ridiculous, because I get pushback on this draft. Like, it's pretty good. He crushed not even the draft, the offseason. He crushed the whole offseason. So I think if you
the in-season, the Flacco trade was good. The Tyson trade was way better. Like he had a very, very strong year.
Cam Robinson was a good trade, even though Cam Robinson was not good, but he's a professional tackle.
Yeah.
And they got him for nothing. I think if you change the face outside the building, I think it makes it very easy for Barry to, and so long as he doesn't screw it up with 2 first-round picks and all this other stuff, it makes it very easy for him to sort of glide into the background, because all of a sudden Deshaun Watson's going to be gone next year, and they can sort of just move past it. As much as people don't want to do that and they want to sort of punish Barry for that, listen, man, people do not understand that part of this is Jimmy Haslam just really likes Andrew Barry and trusts Andrew Barry and feels like he runs a very professional organization. And you can sit there and go and nitpick and all this other stuff, but like this year made it very easy for Jimmy Haslam to be like, you're good. Because the thing is, like, perhaps clearly more than Stefanski, Jimmy Haslam was rooting, I think, for Andrew Barry, and I think he desperately wants him to be around for quite a while. And Andrew Barry said it himself. Like, Andrew Barry is not a guy who I think is just going to pop off for the sake of popping off when he talks in terms of being the guy to guide this franchise in the future. Now, Jimmy Haslam could turn around tomorrow and kick him out of the building, but I think he's gotten at least some assurances that he's going to be here so long as the wheels don't fall off.
Yeah. Well, and not for nothing, and don't get me wrong, I tend to lean where you were going with that. Like, if John Harbaugh walks in the building, is like, hey, I want my own guy, I think Jimmy would listen. But I also don't think that Jimmy would want to do that. I think he might ultimately decide that I have to take advantage of this and I have to get John Harbaugh in the building and I have to do, whatever it takes to do it. I don't think he wants to get rid of Andrew Barry. I think he likes Andrew Barry being his football guy that basically handles everything that he is not equipped to handle, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's why Chris Greer lasted for 10 years in Miami, even though he wasn't that good. I mean, there's a human element to these relationships that people just like look past. But these guys worked hand in hand, side by side, every day for 6 years. Like, there's a relationship there. Like, it goes way beyond just the job.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, undoubtedly. And look, for a while, Chris Greer was a pretty good executive. Now it got bad. And part of that wasn't just I don't even think it was the trades. It's the contracts. He sucked on contracts. Yep. The 201 killed him.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And not just that, they had just about every trade that they made was just like riddled with injuries. They had such bad luck with their big acquisitions, man. It was crazy. But
yes. Bradley Chubb.
All right, well, let's bump it down to the next part of the list. We've got the requested interviews, okay? And like, these are requested, and it's publicly requested, but we don't know when these guys are going to interview or even if they are going to accept. But we've got Harbaugh, we've got Jesse Minter, we've got Nate Shieldhouse, and we've got Grant Udinski. Now, of that group, I think we both would agree that Minter is probably the last on that list, even though super impressive. We don't necessarily want a defensive guy. I mean, it's pretty much like Harbaugh and then the 2 kids at offensive coordinator. Now, do you have an opinion on either one of those guys? I mean, like we said, we really don't know,
Yes. I enjoyed watching Nate Shieldhouse play quarterback in Illinois. Like, that's, I mean, there's just not much there. I mean, he coached under Matt Campbell for a while, for a couple of years. And then he's elevated to being in a position where he's in a good spot with the Rams. I'm very intrigued by him because a lot of their offense is what Kevin Stefanski was doing, but there's more.
Yeah.
And, that part is super intriguing to me, but like, it's impossible to know. Like, Grant Udinski's story, it's a lot like Dan Pitcher. Grant Udinski's story is impressive. I don't know if he's ready to be a head coach. He's super young.
Yeah. He's not even 30 yet, right? Isn't he 29? He's turning 30?
I think his the day the Browns requested requested the interview, he turned 30. He sounds young too, but like I don't doubt he's intelligent and all these other things. And to your point, they took that offense and got it going, got Trevor Lawrence going in a direction that it did not look like he was going to go. Yep. Whether that's going to be able to hold up, we'll see. So he's at least interesting. That might not be there yet, but my view is like people get caught up in this notion of, wow, man, the Browns are looking at so many of these younger guys. And part of that's because they've already looked at so many of these guys through other searches. Like there's people who are sort of annoyed that the Browns aren't talking to Robert Saleh. Well, they did in 2020. Yeah. So if they're going to talk to him again, it's probably going to be a more serious tone. And obviously he's still in the playoffs. So there's that element too. They have not, other than the two guys that are in-house, Jim Schwartz, who was in 2020 a head coaching interview that they ended up with defensive coordinator, and Tommy Rees, who is part of the coordinator search. Between head coach and coordinator, they have not doubled up on anybody. So they talked to Clint Kubiak when they did their coordinator search. They may be satisfied with what they know about Clint Kubiak. So if they already, whether they are or they aren't, they are now using this opportunity to talk to all these other guys, which now includes Udinski, which includes Shieldhouse, which includes all these other guys, to continue to get information. Because even if they don't hire a Grant Udinski, they want to know who he is and where he's going. Because at some point, it may not be head coach. There may be a situation where they want to hire him as a coordinator later or whatever. You just never know with these things. But they want to be able to at least touch base with some of these people and get a sense of who they are. Some of these cases, they may be interviewing guys to learn about other guys in addition to them. So there's research you can learn from like how an organization operates and sort of what they do and some of these other things. So there's more to it than that. So, I can't give you a firm opinion on these guys. I think Dan Pitcher is really interesting. Is he ready to be a head coach? I don't know. Yeah. Same thing with Shieldhouse. Same thing with Udinski. But I love the approach. I like the fact that they are talking to these guys. The one thing I will say about Nate Shieldhouse that I do like the fact he's, again, and I like this with Tommy Rees. I like this when they got the run game coordinator who's a former offensive coordinator at UConn. Shieldhouse is fresh out of college in terms of coaching. So one, he knows how to coach guys of that age, which is going to be critical for the Browns because they are coming. A lot of these guys are coming out of college. And two, innovation travels from the lower levels and works its way up. So high school to college to the NFL. So if he's at Iowa State for a couple of years and he's, at Illinois and all these other places before he gets to the NFL, he has seen a lot of what's going to be coming and may have a sense of what's going to work. What are the challenges you're going to face? The teams are going to try to employ and, or come up with better solutions to how they deal with these things now, which is part of the reason, I thought Tommy Rees is really interesting as a coordinator hire, and then we'll see where that goes. But I'm a big fan of getting guys who have, certainly the value in getting a guy who's been in the NFL and earned his stripes and all that stuff is important. Yeah. But I like the fact that these guys have had recent experience in college because I think that it pays immediate dividends for your team that's going to have to coach these guys. Like, for example, this is not to criticize John Harbaugh, but John Harbaugh is 63 years old.
Yeah.
And yes, he's been coaching kids coming out of college and all this stuff, but like, you're 63 years old, your perspective has sort of changed to a certain extent. Whereas Shieldhouse and these other guys are right there. And some of them, in the case of Udinski, he's barely older than these kids at this point. So he's got a real sense of what's going to work for the athletes that are coming out now, as opposed to the guys who are 30 years old and have been in the league for a while. So that's the other part that I sort of think is notable. Again, does not make them a good coach. Doesn't mean they're going to be a good head coach, but I think those are points that work in their favor.
I think a problem too with a lot of these younger candidates is that you question what kind of coaching staff they could fill out, right? You just question how much of a, how long they've been at these places to establish that kind of network and connections and everything like that. So, I mean, that's another concern with younger coaches, which if you could pair them with Jim Schwartz and the Finnish defense and the Finnish defensive staff and everything like that, then great. You just, you worry about the one side of the ball, but it's definitely an issue that's going to arise,
Well, the flip side of that is the Bill Belichick problem, where, and I think Pete Carroll ran into this too. The older you get, the smaller your circle of assistants sort of is. And Bill Belichick at the end of his Patriots tenure, and then at North Carolina, he's recycled through the same guys over and over and over again. Like, yeah, Josh McDaniels and Joe Judge and all these other guys, like your network has sort of shrunk to the point, you're bringing back like Mike Lombardi to work for you again, like guys who have proven to suck, and because you don't have anybody else. So like, that's the other part where some of these guys being younger and being around and like having been in different organizations, like when you are, and John Harbaugh, John Harbaugh, the example you run into is they have this weird incestuous relationship with Jim Harbaugh where they just keep trading back and forth assistants. And he's been at one place for 19 years. Is he going to be effective in terms of hiring a staff? I assume he probably will be, but at least it's a question I have, given the fact that they've basically been trading him and his brother basically just been trading assistants back and forth. Like, for, to use the example, Jim Harbaugh just fired his offensive coordinator, who, and my immediate reaction is, my immediate reaction is like, now what? Because like he has had the same guy forever. Greg Roman coached with him at University of San Diego. So do I think they'll get a good coordinator? Yeah, I think they can interview you guys and get, but like it may be out of his comfort zone at this point because he's had the same network of people for so long, which can be a strength. But I think there comes a point where it becomes a weakness for you.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that. And it's like those are the interesting parts of these coaching searches that people don't often think about, but there's just so many moving pieces to it. There's so many things that go in the background, and it's going to be crazy to see what we ultimately decide on, because if it's one of these unproven coordinators, that is a legitimate gamble. It's a legitimate risk. And it's funny, somebody, I forget who it was, somebody in the chat was like, Joe says, I don't care what's the worst that could happen. And that's kind of where I'm at, not necessarily like, oh, what's the worst that could happen, but like, why not take a shot on a guy? I'm sure there was a huge part of the Rams organization was like, you know what? This guy's 30 years old. Do we really want to hire Sean McVay? Maybe let's not be the guys that hire him first. Let's just wait a little bit and see what he does when he finally gets an opportunity. There's a million things that you could have done there, but they took the shot. It was a calculated risk, and look at them. They're the envy of the league. Like, I don't know many coaches I wouldn't take McVay over. I don't think I can think of any.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is like, how many coaches have won a Super Bowl with two different teams?
Yeah.
The answer is none. So if the answer is none and you're sitting there going, I want to get to a Super Bowl, then you probably have to hire somebody who hasn't won a Super Bowl yet. So you have to go find that guy. You have to go, if it's Sean McVay as your model or Kevin Stefanski or whoever, you've got to go find that guy and pan for that gold. And so I'm with you on that standpoint where like, yeah, you could sit there and go, yeah, the retread thing isn't, is not like the end of the world or anything. And Mike McDaniel might be the one where you can sit there and go, I can sort of see it, because he could be the Andy Reid type situation where Andy Reid got close to Philly and then ultimately broke through with KC. But like, you're sitting there going, well, I want to hire a guy who's already won a Super Bowl. And then my answer is why? Bill Parcells is the closest, but like everybody else, it's declining return on investment from those guys. So you got to go find your own dude. And so I'm super open-minded on the whole process. Like I can't sit here and go, I can definitively say this guy can be a great head coach or anything. But to your point, if that's the goal, if you're trying to find the next, you're not going to find it if it was the former.
Yeah. No, I agree with that completely. All right, so I got four guys on the wait and see portion of my list here, and I got Clint Kubiak, who we already spoke to as a coordinator in years past, so maybe there's enough comfortability there. But you got Chris Shula, Jeff Halfley, and Joe Brady. Now we talked about
Joe
Shula.
Brady. Joe Brady is a no, hard no on Joe Brady. Woo.
Yeah,
I hate watching his offense. It's funny how fast he apparently turned into Ken Dorsey after they got rid of Ken Dorsey and brought in Joe Brady. And we keep running into this where Joe Brady's really good when he has the best offense ever, and he's not as good when he doesn't. Like, okay, and maybe he's a really good leader of men and all these other things. I don't know, but I'm soured on him just watching the Bills play offense.
Are you trying to tell me that you weren't impressed with the job he did in 2019 with LSU? You think just anybody can win with Burrow and Chase and Jefferson?
God.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Ridiculous. Yeah. So I and maybe he's the right guy, but I have such just a negative preconceived notion of him based on what I've watched because I've been subjected to so much Buffalo Bills football where it's basically like Josh Allen, you've got a good line for the most part when they're healthy, and James Cook, and then it's like, okay, well, I guess we're see what happens. Like it just, I'm very unmoved by what I've seen from that standpoint. Jeff Halfley's interesting. I don't think he fits what the Browns do defensively. I think he's a good coach, but again, I just don't know that the Jeff Halfley's gonna be a guy where you sit there and go, I want to hire a defensive guy who probably doesn't sit here and go, man, I want to mess around with this. I can't really mess around with this defense too much. It's the same thing with Chris Shula, who I think is an interesting candidate to talk to for all the reasons. He's of all, everybody's a young hotshot on offense. He's sort of the young hotshot on defense type that could be really interesting. And I'm not anti-defensive coach. I just, my big question for that is, then the offensive coordinator job is enormous, super important. Yeah. And again, and I've talked about this before, and I will continue to hammer this. If you get it right on offense, you have a major tactical advantage. Sean McVay is a huge advantage as a head coach because he is a good play caller. And I don't mean to say that the guy should be a play caller right now. Like, there are people who are out on Dan Pitcher because he doesn't call plays for the Bengals. I don't care. If he's really smart on offense, he can figure out how to call plays or get somebody else to do it. That's not my concern. What I'm concerned about is how good is he at building an offense, scheming, and all those things. Kyle Shanahan, a huge advantage for the San Francisco 49ers as a play caller and all those other things. Mike McDaniel is a really good coach. The Seattle Seahawks defense is really impressive. But if Clint Kubiak is the secret ingredient that's going to make this team potentially win a Super Bowl because of what he's been able to do on offense, and he leaves, are you suddenly going to take a step back because now you have to replace that guy?
Yeah.
And the example I use on that is Detroit. Dan Campbell has had 3 offensive coordinators as head coach. He had Anthony Lynn, fired after 1 season. He had Ben Johnson, who was there however many years and then went to Chicago. And then they just had Johnny Morton, who he fired in 1 season. And immediately everybody sits there and goes, was Dan Campbell really that good of a coach, or is he only as good when he has super good coordinators? Now, I think he's a good coach for the most part, but it does leave a hole. So when you can get that guy on offense, you get real staying power. Andy Reid, in part, has staying power because he's able to do the play calling and stuff like that and really keep that side of the ball effective and coach up the position of quarterback and all those other things. So, that's the other sort of little piece of this whole thing where I sit there and go, ultimately, I just want a good coach. And I've said this before, Marty Schottenheimer, defensive guy, great developer of quarterbacks. But there's no denying that there's a little bit of extra advantage when you can get that guy right and they're on the offensive side of the ball. As we are looking at right now with Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin wins the Super Bowl with Ben Roethlisberger, and then their offense is crap by and large for every year since. There's a real clear problem they have on that side of the ball. So, it's really hard for me not to want the offensive guy as much as I ultimately just want the right guy.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing too, Pete, is, we assume that they'll bring in a veteran this offseason, but at some point, either this offseason or the next offseason, they're going to take a kid in the draft that is a high-ranking prospect, right? Don't you want an offensive guy that's going to grow with this kid rather than let's just say they promote Schwartz, right? And then, they keep Tommy Reese as offensive coordinator. Okay. Say for some reason, Fernando Mendoza falls to 6. We get Mendoza. He has a great year. The offense looks great. Tommy Reese is getting a lot of phone calls next offseason. It's just that simple. And here you have a guy who's developing a quarterback, but is going to bolt because he's got that's the nature of the beast. When you have an offense and an offensive coordinator that's developing a young quarterback in the right direction and there's offensive success, teams want that. They want to steal that from you and they want to emulate that in their building. So that's my big issue with the defensive guy. Until we have a veteran quarterback who doesn't need development, I want an offensive coach. That's just where I'm at. It's tough because
the element you're talking about is absolutely true. What's weird is how Buffalo was able to, when they had McDermott and they drafted Josh Allen, they had no changes for 4 years, which one makes it to me very clear how big of an a-hole Brian Daboll truly had to be. Yeah. That nobody really wanted him. And then he went to the Giants and proved how big of an a-hole he was immediately. Yeah. But the Ravens had a similar setup. Nothing changed for basically 4 years, even though John Harbaugh was not an offensive guy. But to your point, if you get that guy, as we're seeing with Seattle, is Clint Kubiak going to get a job? We'll see. But at most, he's going to get one more year. Ben Johnson, the only thing that held him up from getting a head coaching job sooner was him. Yeah. Yep. So, yeah, I'm with you. And that's the part where you sit there and go, we want to develop a quarterback. And so that's going to be an important part. Now, we desperately need to wait for 2027 at this point, given what I've seen from this quarterback class already. But nevertheless, you're 100% right. And I don't know how many situations you can create for that unless you are getting the old offensive coordinator that basically has already had his time, which Josh McDaniels is currently in that lane where he's not going anywhere for a while. Hopefully never again. Yeah. I don't know how many of those guys are out there. Yeah. I don't know how many of those guys are out there. And right now, I think Todd Monken is positioned to be one of those guys. He has his own set of drawbacks, but he's the guy who could theoretically be the longtime coordinator for a team. So if you were to get John Harbaugh, but let's be clear, they're not getting John Harbaugh. But if they were to walk in the door and go, John Harbaugh goes, I've got my guy in Todd Monken, Todd Monken's not going anywhere. Yeah. That's the thing where that's the other dynamic which you can sort of create, but you have to have that. And if you are, a Grant Udinsky or a Nate Scheelhaus, that's tough to find unless, of course, it's some weird dynamic where it's your dad is the guy you're bringing in with you. They're just, I don't think they have that guy in the Rolodex where they're going, hey, I've got this guy who's 50 who can come in here and nobody's going to try to hire him away.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, and that's a legitimate concern as you map this thing out. And I think the Browns ultimately would like to find an offensive guy, but if a defensive guy blows their socks off, what are you going to do? You got to do what's best for the team and best for that situation. Yeah, it's funny because it's I feel like nothing's going to happen until Harbaugh makes a decision, right? And that's the ball that has to drop before everything else starts going. I feel like everybody's just kind of waiting on that. But we had Kevin Stefanski interviewed with Miami today. So far, he's interviewed with New York, Atlanta, Tennessee, and Miami, and Baltimore, right? Those are the 5.
He's been with
Kevin's doing work, man. Yeah, Kevin's grinding. Kevin's looking for a job.
He's doing so many interviews. You think the Browns should probably talk to him?
You never know. It's early in the process.
He's the only guy where I could see him being hired before Harbaugh because the Browns aren't in it. But I think unless John Harbaugh comes out and provides a definitive no, tells the Browns to move on, which I don't think he's going to do, even though I think they're effectively out already. I think even if the Browns know they're out, I think they're going to use that as a cover to sort of go through their process because there are guys that they want to talk to are in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. And, I think that's good. If they want to talk to, obviously Shieldhouse can't do much until the Rams are done. Yeah. If you want to talk to somebody on, if it's Kubiak or whoever, if you want to talk to Robert Saleh, if they want to talk to those guys, they're all still in the playoffs. So I don't think you want to rush this thing to just get a hire done if there are guys you really, really want to talk to. And I think John Harbaugh is a good, useful human shield, even if you're not going to get him, to just be able to say, well, listen, nobody's hired anybody yet, so we can sort of go about our process and get all the information we want before we move forward.
I mean, realistically, that's what they should do anyway. Yes. There's a lot of good candidates still in the playoffs. It'd be a shame if they didn't talk to a guy because, we didn't want to wait. We didn't want to move off, whatever,
I agree.
All right. Well, let's shift real quick into the playoffs. All right. Let's talk about last weekend. Any surprises there for you?
Are we talking about the NFL or the NCAA playoffs?
Well, let's start with the NFL, but we can loop around to the NCAA eventually.
Any surprises? Not really. I thought it was pretty straightforward for the most part. Mm-hmm. The Chargers won. Obviously they were very hurt.
Yeah.
But it exposed all the concerns I had with a Jim Harbaugh team, where if he doesn't have a significant talent advantage, he's in trouble.
Yep.
And obviously they got rid of their offensive coordinator. They're throwing him under the bus. They may lose the defensive coordinator whether they like it or not. So they're going to have to do a whole lot of things. But Justin Herbert basically being a human ram, just trying to bully his way through, was a ridiculous way to operate. He just got pummeled. They could not deal with stunts whatsoever. So I thought that was a pretty good matchup for the Patriots in that sense. The Bills-Jags game I thought was a toss-up. I'm certainly happy it went the way that it did, but I thought Buffalo.
Yeah.
Look, I thought Josh Allen would be enough of a difference to get them through. I think Trevor Lawrence is better than he certainly was most of the season and has been throughout his career, but I don't think he's quite there yet.
Yeah. He played real well down the stretch, and it kills me to say it because I was crushing him all year because he did. Yeah. He did not look good early, but man, they righted that ship and figured things out. That genuinely pisses me off. They had a really good year.
Well, I mean, 24th pick is all right. The biggest surprise to me was just C.J. Stroud. He was genuinely awful. Genuinely awful to the point where I was sitting there going, are they going to bench him?
I literally, Pete, I argued earlier this weekend with somebody, till I was blue in the face, that I would still take CJ over Bryce Young. Still. And then he put up that performance, and I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to talk anymore.
Do you know who really hates that CJ Stroud performance? Dante Moore, because Dante Moore keeps getting comped to CJ Stroud. And then he did not play well. And then CJ Stroud played even worse. But just unbelievable how bad just catastrophically bad football. And then occasionally it would just be like, okay, I'm just going to win now. And then threw a beautiful ball to Christian Kirk on a corner route and would just cruise down the field easily. But yeah, I mean,
that red zone interception, I wanted to throw my shoe. I couldn't believe he threw that ball.
Just looked like he just said, this doesn't, threw it as if it didn't count. It's genuinely crazy. But other than that, the games were fun. I mean, I guess I'm a little surprised that the Eagles lost.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of the amount of injuries, I thought they would find a way the offense would find a way to beat the 49ers defense. And that dynamic's going to be really interesting. They fired their offensive coordinator. A.J. Brown seems to be just a spectacularly sized baby.
Yeah. Boy, that drop for the season that he had and all the whining and all the talking, for him to drop that ball at that moment, it's like you almost lose your media privileges after that. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, and then he's probably going to try to get himself out of there, and then we're going to be inundated with questions. Well, should the Browns trade for him? No, absolutely not. They should not trade for A.J. Brown. I understand the appeal. He is slowly declining physically, and he's a giant baby.
Yeah.
He was great when they won the Super Bowl and all that, but the second they won the Super Bowl, it has been just an awful situation. And yes, some of that is on the offensive coordinator, and that job. I'll be curious to see how they do. I mean, obviously they can get somebody good, but like it's just all dealing with egos and personalities in there, as opposed to just figuring out how to win football games. With the amount of talent they have on that side of the ball, it should be easy, and it just looked incredibly difficult at points.
Well, with their big four of the skill guys offensively, with Hurts, with Barkley, with Brown, and with Smith, I think 2 of the 4 are gone this offseason. I think there's going to be a lot of mixing up there, and I certainly don't think it's Hurts, but I think definitely one of the receivers, and I think even Saquon. You know, there's an outside chance that they move on from him or try to trade him or something. You know, I mean, I personally feel like there wasn't that much of a gap between him and Tank Bigsby's not a bad player. They can draft somebody. How he's a witch. They'll be fine without Saquon. I'm just saying, like with that price tag, with the position
to get Barkley to, it feels like you're trying to maneuver.
I'm not trying to get Barkley anywhere. I'm just talking about a situation that is just got big contracts and big money, and Philadelphia might want to mix things up and spice things up. I could definitely see it. Both of those guys will get them return value.
AJ Brown's gonna be tough because they have to eat a lot of money. So they're going to have to get a lot back, more back than they probably should, rightfully deserve. I don't think they get rid of Barkley. I think they're going to keep him because they're going to bet on the data. It basically tells you that type of running back is every other year. That when you have a 2,000-yard season, the year after is not going to be as good. And then ultimately, that's how long it takes to get back to being that guy again. So I think they will at least want to make sure to see if he can be that guy one more season. So I think AJ Brown will be gone. I think the other 3 will stay. I think they could do something really interesting and draft somebody like Sadiq to try to juice up their offense.
Yeah,
I think they're, to your point, I think they could move on from AJ Brown and just basically get young playmakers to sort of fill in the gaps. I think they're about to lose Goddard at this point. I could be wrong on that, but I'm fairly sure they're about to be out of tight ends. So that would be an easy way for them to do that. They may want to reinvest in the offensive line just to try to build depth. But I think they're just going to say, we're going to move on from AJ Brown to take that personality out of this thing and just draft weapons and go hog wild on this side of the ball and be like, how he's essentially going to put his nuts on the table and be like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. And it's going to drive us all crazy. I'm hoping he doesn't trade with Jacksonville and go that route. But like, that's something else I could see where he goes back there and gets a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. off of that team. But I think they're just going to hit the draft and go that route. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And can Jalen Hurts sort of get some of his magic back? Because for whatever reason, they didn't run him as much.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I don't know the thought process on that. But if they were to do those things or, pitch that to a coach coming in, that job gets really interesting really fast because you've got a lot of star power, and then you get to get a couple young guys and build on that side of the ball. So we'll see. So
just on that point, I wanted to mention it at the time, but it just never really presented itself. But when we were talking about McDaniel earlier, and that McDaniel ideally would be the offensive coordinator, I don't think we're going to be able to get a good offensive coordinator with our offense the way that it is right now. Like and when I mean good, I shouldn't have said good. I should say a sought after one. McDaniel, when it comes to offensive coordinator, is going to have his pick of jobs, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
If he wanted to go that route, I think he'll have his pick of jobs, and he's not going to go somewhere with no line and no quarterback and a bunch of youth at running back, receiver, and tight end.
Absolutely. And that's the other part. That's the other part of this whole thing where you're like, if you're Jim Schwartz, you're basically almost, I don't know if it's a gun to your head situation, but you're basically, well, at that point, I think he has a gun to Tommy Reese's head because you don't get to leave for those reasons. Now, can you sell somebody, to your point, sought after candidate on this idea of, you get to build this thing up? Probably not. But yeah, that's the other part where I think you are selling a head coach on the vision of this thing. Again, these are reasons I do not think Jim Schwartz will get the job. But like, I know they like Tommy Rees. I just don't know because I don't think they can give him the head coaching job either. But like, if there's a world where he sticks around and wants to be the coordinator, that's at least interesting. And part of that may be the fact that he doesn't have a lot of options at this exact moment in time. The college, he has gotten looks at college head coaching jobs. He could go that route, but it won't be this year. That's over. So he may just sit there and go, yeah, I could just be the offensive coordinator for this team. But like, yeah, it's one more reason I think offensive head coach makes all the sense in the world.
All right. So back to the playoffs, right? There are currently 2 head coaches in the playoffs still with Super Bowl rings and only 1 quarterback, and that's Matt Stafford, Sean McVay. And this guy might buck your little trend, buddy, but our boy in Denver has a chance to win his 2nd Super Bowl with a 2nd team.
Nah. He has a shot, but look, I'm sorry. I just don't. Look,
I don't either. But like, look at the competition.
I know the AFC is not good. The AFC is not good. Everybody's
neither is the NFC. Like, there's no slam dunk on either side. Like, there's good teams. There's good teams, but there's not a single team left right now that I wouldn't be like, wow, they won it. Like, that'd be a surprise for me.
I don't know. The Seahawks are really good. The Bears are really good. The Rams are really good.
Are really good, but Pete, it's McDonald and Sam Darnold.
I know.
Like, I'm just saying, like, that's the allure to this playoffs to me.
True.
Is you're likely going to have a first-time Super Bowl winner at quarterback and very likely at head coach too. That's cool.
Yeah, I don't put it past the Bills to not win that game against the Broncos.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think Josh Allen's the best player in football that's still in the playoffs. I think that can be a difference maker. But, man, that Denver defense is good. And Buffalo, when you can slow down their running game and you can put enough pressure on Josh Allen, but you don't let him get outside, we've seen Josh Allen play bad football.
True.
Real bad football in those scenarios. That's a really good defense in Denver. And, look, it was last year. Denver went into Buffalo and played him tougher than I thought last year in Buffalo. And I think that team last year in Buffalo is better than they are this year, especially defensively.
If the Bills, I should say, if the Broncos and the Texans somehow win, who the hell do you pick in that game?
The Broncos-Texans?
Yeah.
I picked the under. I picked the under. That is the only pick I make is the under.
Which quarterback is going to screw it up in that game, Bo Nix or C.J. Stroud?
Can you bet on negative points? Is that a thing?
Yeah, like the AFC's tough, man. Like, I have real questions as to how far the Patriots can go. Drake May's phenomenal, but they are missing some key elements to that team, and they played a super bad schedule and made the most of it.
Yeah, I
am very curious. Those are good matchups, but I think the NFC team, the biggest advantage to your theory about the Broncos, they only have to play one NFC team. That's it. Yep. Like, whatever happens, they would only have to play one of them. If they had to go through the whole gauntlet, I think they'd be cooked. But they've got a shot. To your point, the defense is really, really good. The other part was Sean Payton has a weird fascination with not running the ball when he has Bo Nix as quarterback, and he just keeps throwing it and allowing him to make mistakes. And I'll be curious to see if he can be disciplined in that approach. But you're right. Like, because of the Chiefs being out of it, because of all these other teams being out of it, there's a lot of opportunity for something new is going to happen one way or the other.
If you had to guesstimate as to a Super Bowl matchup, who you liking right now?
Man, I might pick the Bears. I
might pick the Rams. I think that's the game for the NFC.
But here's the problem. The Rams are going to lose at some point. Yeah. Their special teams are going to get them beat. They should have lost already because of their special teams.
Yeah.
That's going to lose them a game at some point. They've got to win 3 games without having special teams absolutely obliterate them. And I just don't think it's going to happen. And you can sit there and you can go, Caleb Williams is at some point going to have a game where he's just weird in terms of accuracy and some of the stuff. But like, that should have happened against the Packers. And he just hung around long enough to just win. Just to say, screw it, I win, and he did. They just do so many things like dynamically well that I think they're a problem. But their defense is not very good either, too. So that's the other question. So, just for the sake of picking, I'll say the Bears. Man, I'll say the Broncos. I don't feel good about it at all.
You shouldn't. You shouldn't.
Because the thing is, like, if CJ Stroud was just not awful, I could be like, yeah, the Texans could be in, but he was catastrophic.
Yeah. Yeah, but you know what?
And they have to go on the road every game.
Pittsburgh's defense can make a lot of quarterbacks look wonky in the passing game. They can. That defense is giving fits to a lot of – what's that?
He couldn't catch a snap. He had 5 fumbles in the game.
First of all, it was only 4, and he caught most of them, Pete. Don't be dramatic.
Had 5 fumbles, scored in the box score, and got 3.
I mean, you're not wrong. But it's like, what are the odds that he plays that bad next game?
That's basically your argument. It's like he got his terrible game out of the way, and it's all smooth sailing from here.
That's not a bad argument. I've made worse arguments. I'll be the first to admit it.
Because here's the thing. Like, you can sit there and go, Josh Allen can take this thing to the playoffs. The Bills' defense is not good. It's not good. They played well enough. I will give them credit for getting them through and beating the Jaguars and coming up with some big plays. And Trevor Lawrence coming through with some clutch, throw it right to the other team interceptions. But they're just not good. And if I know they're trying to get some guys back. If Ed Oliver can actually play and contribute, that's huge for them. They've got some possibilities for them. But like overall, like they're just not good, and I don't think they're going to hold up, and they're going to let them down. The Browns almost took them out.
Yeah, that's real.
So, I just can't. And there's also a Josh Allen factor where at some point he just always seems to gag when at some point. So yeah, I can't get there with them. So I'll say Bears Broncos. I don't feel good about Broncos because Bo Nix just is crazy. But like this is such a defensive AFC right now.
Yeah,
that I think one of those teams is going to make it.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because watching that Houston defense, man, they're something else. They're fast, they're physical. Even the secondary and the linebackers fly around and fly to the football and hit hard. But that front, first of all,
it's not the linebackers. It's not the linebackers.
That the kid from Alabama, Tua is good.
No,
that kid can play. He's tough.
I'll tell you what sets. I'll tell you what sets.
Tommy Togiai. I'm gonna lose my freaking mind. We let that kid go.
Well,
2 years in,
we know what people who frequent downtown Cleveland kind of know what happened to Tommy Togiai. Unfortunately, it seemed he apparently grew up like Data loved him. I was like, man, this could be an absolute steal. And curses me for being right too early. Credit to him, man. He figured it out because he was awful for the Browns. He was genuinely awful. And for whatever reason, whatever figured him out, there were multiple times, and it wasn't just him, but multiple Steelers offensive linemen who there is no pancake for defensive linemen. There were multiple times Steelers offensive guards were getting pancaked by their defensive tackles on the way to just bashing Aaron Rodgers into the ground. But no, their linebackers are not good. I think
Al-Shaair is good.
He's fine. Toto is the one I don't have any particular for. But what sets the tone for them and what I'd love to steal or draft is what they get out of Jalen Petrie.
Yeah.
He's
a Swiss Army knife. That kid's good.
But it's his aggressiveness from that slot position where like, oh, you want to run wide receiver screen? I will snuff it out immediately. Which just so like I sit there and people will throw out, oh man, the Browns should get this tiny itty bitty corner from Indiana, and I sit there and go, no, I want bigger slot guys. I want those safety types. And
that Pons, right? Isn't he like 5'9", like buck
5'9", and at least listed 173 pounds? He's tiny, very good.
He's listed at 173.
Yeah, he's itty bitty.
Yeah.
So, and don't get me wrong, he's good. It's just like
that's a 15-year-old.
But that's my thing is like I would rather go the other direction. I have a guy who can sort of do a little bit of the slot corner stuff in Miles Harden. I'd rather go the other way and get a bigger body guy who can do a little bit more of the dirty work and have a little bit of that, what Jalen Petrie offers off that slot position to do that. Now, this will immediately get Ohio State honks going and going.
Caleb.
Right. this is immediately where you go. If you go, that would be Caleb Downs, and it would be. That's exactly where I'd put him. But I think there are other guys in the draft who I will cover at some point who I think are interesting in terms of that possibility. But like, that's the thing where I sit there and I watch the Houston Texans defense and go, the Browns do not have that.
All right. Well, let's shift to the college football playoffs real quick, because I want to end up with a little bit of draft talk. But before we get into that, first game, Ole Miss Miami was awesome. Awesome. It was a really fun game. Now, I mean, it doesn't matter what side of the ball. Who stands out in that game as a guy that, well, I already know one that you think is going to disappoint at the next level, that is being propped up quite high. But on those two teams, who are some of the guys that you're highlighting in the draft this year?
So if you're a Browns fan, you sit there and you go, Francis Maui-Noah, right tackle. And the question is going to be, what is he in the NFL? And I don't know the answer to that. I think that it becomes super easy to project everybody into guard. And the NFL sits there and goes, listen, man, I get it, but we don't have any tackles. So so there's a real chance he's going to play tackle. And the guy I will immediately go to on that is Campbell for the Patriots, because a lot of people immediately goes, well, they drafted him. They're going to see if he can play tackle, but if he can't, Will Campbell can slide inside the guard. And obviously he did fine as a tackle. There are a couple tackles that did better than him. So my suspicion is that Francis Maui-Noah is either going to, if he's a guard, he's obviously not going to go that high. Yeah. But I suspect a team is going to take him very high, see if he can't play tackle, and then default to guard if they have to. And part of that is just because whatever you think of him, he's just so big that it's tough to get around him. So he can sort of make up some of the difference that he might be giving up in terms of that element. You know, I don't have any interest in him. The Browns better not have any interest in, but Reuben Bain will certainly be a top of conversation. He doesn't fit the parameters the Browns look for on the defensive line, because he is allegedly going to measure in with 31-inch arms. And that is tiny. That is shorter than Mason Graham. That is shorter than Aiden Huntington. And don't get me wrong, he's very good. But when you watch him play tackles who are actual tackles in the NFL, or I should say are going to be tackles in the NFL, which do not play for the Ohio State Buckeyes because they don't have any of those, he has some issues. And he wasn't as good against Ole Miss as he was smacking around whoever they threw out there. Were all good. Ohio State basically has 5 guards they throw out there on the offensive line. You smack those guys around. Ole Miss was able to sort of contain him more and limit him. And I've seen comparisons to Brandon Graham. I've seen the one I think is more interesting is Daniel Jeremiah's comp is Melvin Ingram. Mm-hmm. Those are good players, not in the top 10 to me anyway. So I think that's going to be a challenge for him. And so I understand why people like him. But if you just in general, like the guy who made the big play against Ohio State, Keandre Scott, the slot corner for Miami, is at least interesting. He has a little bit of size to him. Obviously made that big interception. Certainly interesting. Miami's got several linemen. There will be a conversation. I immediately want no part of it involving Carson Beck. He's got no arm. I keep waiting for him to choke. Just based on what he still does not have good answers to pressure. And he hasn't really made that many good throws in the playoffs. Largely he's won with his legs. Made a couple of decent throws.
No, but that's been the difference for Miami is he's extended a lot of drives with his feet that I didn't really think that was part of his game. I'm not a super big fan of his, but he's definitely been better than I thought this year.
He's just, to me, he just screams backup court, underwhelming backup. And so I want no part of that. Ole Miss, we'll see what happens with Trinidad Chambliss. He's still trying to appeal his petition to the NCAA to try to extend his eligibility.
What if he doesn't? What do you think about him as a pro prospect? I've heard people all over the board on him. I've heard people say he's QB2 this year. I don't see it. I think he's a nice player, but I don't know about all that.
So when you are desperately trying to stay in college, it usually gives you a hint.
Yeah.
Now, granted, if he stays in college and can play another year, he basically gets his whole rookie contract in 1 year.
Yeah.
And that's partly part of it. He's not a first-round pick. I don't think he's a second-round pick. I think he's in that next tier. I could see a world where Trinidad Chambliss has a similar career to Jalen Hurts. The difference to me is that Trinidad Chambliss is listed 6 foot 200 pounds.
Yep.
Jalen Hurts is legitimately measured in 6'1", 222, and whatever he did to his weight when he measured in. Nevertheless, he's a big boy.
And I don't know if you know this, Pete, but he can squat 600 pounds. They don't really talk about it, though.
Yes. So Trinidad Chambliss is a fantastic college quarterback. He's really smart. And, that play of him sort of calling out and then daring the Miami blitz was awesome. And he carries himself with a presence. And look, man, I have watched an unusual amount of Fair State tape for reasons that I don't need to get into, but I have seen a lot of their offense. In clinic talks and some other stuff. So look, he's won national titles. He's done all this stuff. He's a big time player. He has questionable accuracy at times. There are too many times where you see balls drifting on him. He does some good stuff, but that's where I sit there and go, I could see the Jalen Hurts arc for him. So if the NFL follows a similar trend that they did last year, where there was a clear line of demarcation, Tyler Shuck here in guys that the NFL thought could be starters, and then there was a round and a half break before we got to Jalen Milroe taken by the Seattle Seahawks. If the NFL takes a similar approach, I think Chambliss will be on the Jalen Milroe side. Interesting quarterback prospect. I think he's interesting. I could see where he's a good player. I could see where he ends up being a starter for a year or few.
Yeah.
Do I see franchise quarterback? No. And if you're sitting there going, well, the Browns should take a flyer on him. My question is, how many flyers do you need to take at this point? You got Shedeur Sanders, you've got Dylan Gabriel. I understand the approach and I get it, but aren't we now at a point where we're sort of sitting there to get the big play as opposed to nickel and diming it?
Yeah.
Because
when are you going to make a move for a dude?
You're going to have to put this guy somewhere. And if we are all sitting here or at least listening to me as I advocate, wait till 2027. Are you going to take Trinidad Chambliss, put him in a weird situation where you're sitting there going, well, we got to find out what he does now. So we're going to put him in a weird situation where he's got to play.
Yeah.
Or we have essentially wasted a draft pick on a guy that we are already planning to get rid of, which is what most people were sort of annoyed by with
Dylan
the
Gabriel.
whole Shedeur and Dylan Gabriel option, which if they wait till 2027, you're going to give those guys 2 years to sort of be whatever they're going to be.
Yeah.
But because we're going to get into why I'm advocating waiting till 2027 when we talk about the other playoff game. But that's where I sit there and go, I get why somebody would like Chambliss. It would not be me. If Philadelphia did not have Tanner McKee, I'd be all over Trinidad Chambliss. He's perfect for.
How about San Francisco? I think that'd be a great fit behind Purdy.
Well, I mean, they've got Mac Jones, but I mean,
for now. But
if you want to put Trinidad Chambliss
as
quarterback for a while and sit there and go, yeah, we're just going to have you learn this offense. Yeah, that's what he is. That's the stuff he does. So, if in your world, if we hire Mike McDaniel, maybe there's a world where he sits there and go, Trinidad's my dude. The other thing that's going to hurt Trinidad Chambliss, because it hurt Jackson Dart and it hurt Matt Corral. Well, I should say this whole thing started with Matt Corral. Is that offense is to the NFL easy.
Yeah.
Which is 1,000% a credit to Lane Kiffin and those guys there, that they make it that easy. But that was something that was held against Jackson Dart. It will be held to at least a certain extent to Trinidad Chambliss. So, yeah, I think there's limitations with that. The other guy, Ole Miss has a couple interesting players. Daquan, I don't remember what his last name is. The tight end is kind of interesting. It's sort of a weird body type who does some interesting things. Obviously, he's gotten some notoriety for being a dope before the half and not running out of bounds. But he's a unit in terms of size. He's got an interesting amount of production. He's the only guy on offense where I sit there and go, yeah, he's kind of interesting, because everybody else is a double transfer who's never really produced anywhere. And then, they've got a bunch of big boy linemen, and I don't know how any of those guys are really going to do until we get athletic testing. So, Ole Miss is surprisingly limited in terms of how many draft prospects they are for how good they were and how close they were to the national
They had
championship.
a ton of guys go last year. They had a ton of kids get drafted last year.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about the other game, man. That was an absolute blowout. And you know what? Honestly, tip of the cap to Curt Cignetti. He's awesome. Indiana's so good, so well coached, so tough. But Indiana's old. And like Indiana has Mendoza, right? They got Surratt and then Omar Cooper Jr. a little bit, but outside of Pons on defense, man, they're old. Like I don't see like a ton of like NFL guys in there.
Well, they got dudes. I am very intrigued by Carter Smith, the left tackle.
Okay.
Who is 21. I think he might be a guy who kicks inside, but he's pretty good. You mentioned the skill players that matter. Defensively, Mikael Kamara is going to be interesting because he had a very weird career, really, really productive last year, and then it seems like he took this year pass fail. And he's got a weird body type, and he's like 6'1", but like 260 some. But I'm sure people saw that clip floating around where he's the dude who made Isaiah World literally take 2 steps both ways before he fell down and got spun out.
Yeah.
And they just seem to find defensive tackles that cause problems. Like I like the kid they got last year. They came out of the draft last year who ended up in San Francisco. Yes, Pons is certainly going to be a guy. But yeah, this is part of why Indiana's good is that they take guys out of the portal who have the right mindset for what Curt Cignetti wants. They want to be they will be coached, they're disciplined, all these other elements, so they look like a professional operation. And a lot of those guys don't have huge draft aspirations. My other takeaway from this, which should have been clear. Oh, the other guy they have, but it won't be eligible this year, is that Baker receiver. He's good. The other takeaway from that is Fernando Mendoza is better than people want to give him credit for. He's like legit good. People keep trying to diminish him. I've heard people who defend Shedeur Sanders seem to think that somehow Shedeur Sanders is better than this kid, which is absolutely insane.
Well, he threw for more yards his last year at Colorado, Pete. His season was actually more impressive than Mendoza's Heisman season.
Yeah.
That's the argument I've heard.
There are some small issues with Mendoza in terms of like how many sacks he takes and stuff like that, but like his profile is impressive.
Yeah.
I've seen the stuff floating around about Sam Bradford, and maybe he's a healthier Sam Bradford, but he does a lot of stuff correctly, and I think it laid bare just how much better he is than Dante Moore right now, and that's largely a product of experience, everything else, but they have dudes and he is operating a super high level. And right now that team is an absolute machine as they roll. And it's going to be interesting to see if they can maintain it after this year, because I think it's official, but I'm not sure that they're going to get the TCU quarterback who I like out of the portal.
Hoover, right?
Yeah, Josh Hoover is going to be Indiana's quarterback, and probably the next dude who just goes off and does all these other things, that they're going to have staying power. But yeah, of the guys on Indiana, Carter Smith's the one I sit there and go, he's very intriguing to me. I'm very curious to see how he tests. Maybe he can stick it at tackle. I get the sense that he's probably better suited for guard, but he strikes me as that Joe Bitonio type. Yep. And obviously Joe Bitonio is a genuine freak athlete and it's just an absolute stud. I don't know that Carter Smith's going to be in there, but just that type of tackle who kicks into guard and just is a solid player for a very long time is my impression, but we'll see what happens when we get more info.
Well, let me ask you this about Mendoza, because I've had arguments with people. I like Mendoza, right? And my comp for Mendoza, the guy that I see Jared Goff with mobility. And I say that's like the highest of praise, because Goff is a good pocket passer. And I think that if Mendoza couldn't run, he'd be a good pocket passer and a good solid quarterback. But he's got athleticism and he's got good feet. He's got the ability to tuck it and run. He's 6'5", 230. Like there's a lot to really like about Mendoza. I personally, if we had the number 1 pick, I would take him.
Easy.
Question. And you hear people talk like, oh, he's not a legit number 1. It's a down year. It's this, it's that. He's a quarterback with prototype size, prototype skills. He's super intelligent, and he's got feet. He's an athlete. What the hell else could you be looking for? I think it's a great deal for the Raiders. And if I'm I don't think anybody would want to go to Vegas. And I look at that ownership situation, and I think the Brady stuff is weird. I don't think Mark Davis is a great owner. I don't view the Vegas job as a great job. Mm-hmm. But if Kevin Stefanski took that job because he knew he was going to get Fernando Mendoza, I would be like, yeah, that's a combination I think can make some noise eventually. It's a shame they're in the toughest division, but still, I think he's a good player. I think that's a good deal for the Raiders.
Yeah, they've got to figure out the rest of it. I don't worry about him. There's some small things he's got to correct, but man, just he calamitous in the pocket in terms of some of the sacks he takes because he tries to bet on his athleticism badly. Yeah. But yeah, easy kid to work with. To me, just move right into it. Whereas Dante Moore,
let's go to the other
side. Dante Moore. Well, I mean, he has not made it official yet, but all indications are he's going to declare because Dylan Raiola was waiting.
Yeah.
Before committing to Oregon to find out what Dante Moore was going to do, so the signal is out there. And then, so that's there. Dante Moore is terrifying. His profile just yields a wild range of outcomes, one of which is Deshaun Kaiser, which I do not want. I do not want to draft a redshirt sophomore quarterback. I do not want to draft somebody with that amount of limited experience. I immediately go, you have to sit for a year. So in that case, just stay in college and play another year, but you cannot put him out there on the field as a starter. He's still got a lot. He's very talented. He's incredibly gifted in terms of the arm talent, the accuracy, the things he can do are incredible, but there's so much football he's got left to learn. And you saw that in terms of how he handles pressure, how he makes some of the decisions he makes, not having answers to some of these things, and he doesn't have answers in college. That is concerning because now he's going to have to come up not only answers, but answers to more difficult formulas in the NFL. So I am never going to fault the kid for going to the NFL and saying, I'm going to get picked basically top 2. But I want no part of it if I'm the Browns. And I'll be honest, the most interesting situation for me, the one situation where I think it could work, and I'll be curious to see how they pursue it, is Arizona. Arizona, if they get the right coach, is a really interesting setup because Paris Johnson, very good left tackle. You've got talented receivers.
Yeah.
You have the makings of a supporting cast that can work with a guy like Dante Moore.
Best tight end in football right now.
So if you get a good head coach and you can finagle that move, and if the Jets are true to their word that they really don't want to do it this year, but are happy to milk the pick for draft assets, I could see where that's the case. I'll be curious to see if the Jets can finagle more because the Jets' best play would be to trade down further because they can get more stuff. But I'm curious if there's some small price they'd be willing to pay if they're really not interested, if they really don't want to be forced in a situation where they're taking a guy like Dante Moore, that they just flip picks with Arizona and let Arizona take it, because I think there's a world where it makes sense for Arizona that it just does not make sense in Cleveland. He had a extraordinarily veteran line at Oregon with multiple sixth-year guys, including Pregnon, who I want no part of because he's old, and Alex Harkey, who's old. Isaiah World looked bad in that game. Their centers, whatever. All those guys are potential.
The center is highly thought of.
Yeah.
But
look, I don't know what the Browns are going to do in terms of their hire, but he's 320 as a center. I don't know, or 330 as a center. I don't know how that's going to play. And I've got worries that he's going to be the dude that the Raiders took, who they don't basically use now.
Well, let's just get a bunch of phone booth guys so we can use Zinter. It's one less hole to fill.
Yeah, that's true. And then
Pete, let me ask you this before you go any further. What if he falls to 6?
What, Dante Moore? No, no, absolutely.
No, not. I'm just saying, realistically, what if he falls to 6? And what if, say we hire Shieldhouse, right? And he says, "This is my guy. We have Dylan Gabriel and Deshaun Watson in front of him. He's not going to play all year, but this is our guy."
No.
If you could somehow guarantee that he wouldn't see the
I can't. This team, this organization, this fan base could not deal with the 5th round pick and his reps. Well, we're gonna put the 6th pick in the draft in the bench the whole year. We cannot do it. We do not have the ability to do this. It would be the best thing in the world for him to sit for the whole year, but it will not happen. And look, and if I could, if there's some weird scenario where that happens, I am ransoming him to whoever will take him. I do not want any part of this. I understand the talent. The risk versus reward to me is not there with him, and I think it will end disastrously. But I just watched this team, this fan base, have to sit there and go, the 5th round pick's not getting first team reps, but when he started out as 4th string, and now
I feel like this fan base learned a lot of patience this year. I feel like you're not giving them credit.
Does he walk in? Does he walk into the facility and, like, you know, in your scenario, Shieldhouse goes, pick a foot, and then he gets the sledgehammer out and goes, "You're not playing this year." Like, there's just that. This is the problem. Is like, and nobody wants to hear that, but like, you have to get somebody who's ready to come in and play, because this fan base will not do it. If you're the Green Bay Packers, you can do this without issue, and nobody's going to care, or they'll care, but like, you will do it and not have a problem. The fiasco with this team, and God knows, I would hope they've learned a lot of lessons, but like, and they really want to protect the East Cleveland kid, but good Lord, this is the thing. Just like we're talking about earlier with the people who are like, oh man, I'm okay with losing for a while as long as these young guys get better and do all this stuff. And then week 5, this sucks, I hate this, and everybody should be fired.
It was well before week 5.
Yeah,
well before.
The fact that, like, you're going to sit there and go, no, we're all in on this. We're going to wait. We're going to get this quarterback right. We're going to treat him all great. And then by week 7, they're like, man, 7 weeks is a long time to wait. Look, he's not going to get any better by sitting. And you know, the game experience can be super valuable, even though, like, there's all kinds of evidence, even if you want to call it anecdotal, that supports the idea that, like, sitting does benefit quarterbacks. And the Green Bay Packers have figured this thing out and don't have this problem. You know, the one guy
they haven't had a quarterback problem in 30 years. It's bullshit.
Yeah, the one guy who couldn't play is Brian Brom, but like everybody else, they sat and developed and did all that. I mean, they completely transformed Aaron Rodgers' throwing motion while he was on the bench over that period. You can absolutely play guys too early, and we've had quarterbacks. Deshaun Kaiser is a perfect example. He came out and said it. I shouldn't have been playing. Yep. So, no, like, it's just an absolute awful approach to just throw guys out there. There's absolutely stuff they can learn. There's absolutely stuff they can figure out well before. The practice field is super valuable. And this is part, like, people don't account for the practice field and what those reps and all this stuff. So I wish nothing but the best for Dante Moore. And if the Jets take him, I hope the second team that gets him will be able to figure him out, because he will not work with the Jets, because that's just how they operate. But, like, terrible idea for the Browns. I love the talent. I wish he would stay in school, because the talent is amazing. I just think he needs another year of playing to figure it out, because right now, if you get into the data, you go, oh man, the Oregon stuff looks real good, but that UCLA stuff is right there, and it drags a lot of his stuff down. And there's stuff at Oregon he just didn't do that give you causes for concern. So that, combined with that, and Ty Simpson, who I enjoy watching, but do not want as my quarterback, certainly not with the 6th pick. And I think he's going to be gone before 24, hopefully 21st overall. So I'm on to 27. I'm there. I'm waiting until the next draft, and people can be mad and go, well, I'm tired of waiting and all this. I get all those arguments. 27 is going to be a better class. Yeah. We need to wait to finalize this draft class. If Dante Moore would have stayed, it would have been a bananas class. But the fact that everything suggests he's going to be in, just build up the rest of the offense and put whoever you're ultimately going to get in a way better position for next year.
Yeah. Well, last thing I'm going to ask you before we go, because we're up against it, and I think I know what you're going to say here. Me personally, I have no problems with the 6th pick. I want to move back, and I want to move back in the worst way. I don't see a ton of top-end stuff. I see a decent amount of wide receivers that I like, and I see a decent amount of linemen that I like, and I feel like the middle of the first round would be perfect. if we could pick up an additional pick. I mean, that's the problem. If I don't want to take somebody at 6, who the hell wants to move up to 6? So that's our issue. But I don't love the top of this draft, man. I really don't. Like, there's a lot of good players, right? But there's not guys I'm like, oh, that's a slam dunk top 10 pick. That's a slam dunk top 5 pick. Like, we're hearing Cardinal Tate going as high as 2. No flipping way, dude.
I think he's going to go top 5. I think he's going to go top 5.
You think he goes top 5? Really?
And the thing is, I'm going to take the best receiver in the draft at 6 if I have to.
Yeah.
And to me, it's Mekhi Lemon. He is the best receiver in the class. He is unbelievable. I waited until Cardinal Tate was done and everything else to go through the numbers and everything with Mekhi Lemon and the tape and everything else. I get it. And I've made this argument against myself to preface it. He's 5'11", maybe. I hope. Yeah. He's 195 pounds. He's probably a 4'5" guy, maybe even a 4'6" guy. And he's the best receiver in the class. And it's not even close how good he is at the sport. Like, Jordan Tyson is really good. And if he didn't have the health, you could make a case for it. Right there.
Yeah.
But he does. He, for people who, ACL, PCL, MCL tears as a sophomore, I think, then had the collarbone issue his junior year at the end of the season. And then this past year, he missed a bunch of time with hamstring and some other issues.
Soft tissue stuff scares me.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I mean, it just comes down to if he got hurt in college, why should I believe he's not going to get hurt in the NFL? And maybe it will be like Puka Nacua, where you're like, he never played in college because it's always hurt, and then has magically had great health. Whatever, like, great, but you got him in round 5. I'm talking about 6th pick in the draft. Mekhi Lemon is a beast. I wrote a long article, I don't know about how long it is, a detailed article that explains the numbers and just how good he is. I gave an athletic comp to watch, which if that's what he produces and that's who he becomes, no one will question the fact he's a slot receiver. No one will care.
Who was your comp? Is it JSN?
No.
Who was it? Or is it I'll have to read the article. I got you.
Well, I was going to say you could keep guessing, but and then athletic comp of who they compare to, and then the blueprint for the offense that you can work with through that framework. So you can sit there and go, man, I don't like that he's a slot receiver. If he becomes the guy who he comps to, you will never think about it twice, and you'll be like, I love everything about this. So, when that guy was drafted in round 4, if they knew what he was going to be, no one would question that taking him was 6th pick overall. So that's where I'm at. Like, if you
same school,
yes. So there you go. You figured it out. If the Browns can trade down and still get him because the NFL still hung up on these weird labels and all these other things, great. But if you're sitting there and you're going, man, I don't love, and maybe one of the tackles is like everything you hope he's going to be. And
like Monroe Freeling, that's the hot name right now, the Georgia kid.
Yes, it is. Now, I would love him at the bottom of the round. I'm very intrigued.
I don't know if that's going to happen, Pete.
I don't think he's going to go super. He's still got work to do.
Yeah.
I'm talking about 20. I think 24 is about right for him. I'm hoping.
Okay.
But nevertheless, the other part is like, just as a general conceptual argument, yes, offensive line is super important. You're never going to hear me say otherwise. But and if you can get a Penei Sewell, great. That is a game changer. But ultimately, you need 5 guys who are pretty good at being an offensive lineman.
I was just going to say, I feel like there's so much importance. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
If you get game changers at a position like wide receiver, your offense takes off. You look at the Cincinnati Bengals, who are not that great of a team, but Jamar Chase and T. Higgins make it that much better. So I get where people are going to be like, no, you have to get the offensive tackle. If we're all sitting here going, I do think it's a good offensive tackle class. I just don't know if it's going to be top 5 pick offensive tackle type guy. I don't know if Armand Membu is in this draft. If one of these guys can become Kelvin Banks, you're going to be thrilled. But
there's
I don't
so much time though. There's so that's one thing that
I don't have enough information.
So much time.
But Mekhi Lemon, the other thing I will briefly mention, the other thing I like about Mekhi Lemon is you and I have talked about this endlessly all year. We love the way Harold Fannin and Quinshon Judkins play and the way they fight and the way they just are just constantly every
Don't
yard.
say.
Mekhi Lemon is exactly the same way in terms of how he played. He had 21 missed tackles forced in college as a receiver, which was 7th in the nation. He's that same guy. And like, if the Browns, if those are the 3 guys they had to start building this thing on offense, with Jerry Jeudy now being an outside receiver and doing all these other elements, every team that cannot tackle, they will be absolute hell for. Like, if you cannot tackle, the Browns will be absolute and unending hell for teams, because they just do not go down easy. They compete and everything else. You can sit there and complain about Mekhi Lemon's size. Watch him in contested catch situation. He's just an absolute dog in those things. So I cannot talk enough about how good he is. I will have plenty of opportunities to do it. But if you can subscribe to the OBR and read it, read the article. Don't be surprised if you have to come away with the same approach, because if he becomes who I think he can become, you will not question taking him 6th overall.
Yeah, agreed completely. And just to back up what Pete just said, guys, this is the absolute best time of year to jump into that OBR and subscribe. It's the absolute best. All the insider forums, all that stuff, like all the information you could ever possibly want is right there, right for the asking. You could specify like as detail-oriented questions as you want. OBR is where it's at. As always, Pete, happy Tuesday, brother. It's always a pleasure. Look forward to this weekend of some amazing football, minus the Jaguars and the Steelers. It couldn't be better. I'm excited about it. But either way, great show, homie. I'll see you guys next week. And guys, thank you so much for sticking with us. It's always a pleasure. We appreciate it so much. We'll catch you guys next Tuesday.